talking about the women and security in the region is very key, especially when we see that before, the violence affected the lives of millions of women all over the world. And in the past, we used to sort of struggle between and talk about the violence inside the family, what's called as a gender-based violence. But unfortunately, what's happened, and specifically after the Arab Spring, where in the beginning men and women went together to fight for the same right and gain more democracy and try to have a better world for both, what's happened that right after the end of this movement of fight and prosperity, looking for prosperity, ended up where women were basically frightened and thrown away from the public space. And we remember many stories like women in the case of the blue bra that happened in Egypt right after the revolution, or even the young woman that was raped in Tunisia during this period right after the revolution again. And unfortunately, this phenomenon of violence had always existed and still exists, and unless we put real measures against that. Legislation, especially those in the Maghreb area, talking Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, are trying to tackle that and finding new legal means to stop the violence against women, even in a public sphere. But then, in the other hand, this should be looked in a more in-depth, because it goes into the root of these countries. Those countries should focus into the egalitarian society where the education itself, the education of the young kids within the school, there should be no differentiation. If we go and look into the curriculum and the syllabus of different countries of the region, we see that there is already a mindset that produced this difference within the gender, based on gender. I mean, a 5-year-old boy is just a 5-year-old kid, nothing else. And we should not teach them at this young age the difference between the genders and make sure that a boy is in a better position or in a growing up position than a woman. And that's what leads the society to absolutely feed during all this year until a very grown age, where we manage to produce violent men, and women are very isolated and keep suffering from that. The ways to tackle that can come from different angles. Education being a main pillar. The other pillar is also, if we see in the region, for instance, the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Violence and Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW, we see that every Arab country or every country in the region ratified the CEDAW Convention. Of course, there was a lot of reservation. Many of this reservation goes on the core of the convention itself. But then, on the other hand, the follow-up and the implementation are not done, or when they are started to be done, they are not done properly. They are not given enough room or enough capacity to women to be developed. And unfortunately, that's what creates a double standard in this society. The other important element that goes within the legislation itself is to see that those women suffer from a double standard in a legislation level. For instance, women are from more the Constitution, I would say, would talk about citizenship. They embrace the citizenship, then, which means the equality. But then on the other hand, if you go in depth and you go into what calls the family structure, they are very often regulated under the Sharia law. And these laws, unfortunately, whether we want it or not, it goes to the fact that women are considered on a lower level in their family and within the society itself. And this create a double standard because, for instance, if we have women in the military corps, we have women in the judiciary, we have women in high position of the state, we have even women that run for political in the political party, or even a woman that run for president's candidacy. But then if it goes to the private sphere, she would be considered as a half citizen. And I think this all discrepancy doesn't give the right treatment. This goes against even the UN, not just only the CEDAW itself, but even the UN, measures, and even the human rights, because we believe, and when we talk, when we see this with this phenomena, we do realize that the human right, as if the human right exclude women's right. Well, the human rights should integrate the women's right, because we cannot think about a balanced society or a balanced or effective and non-violent society by excluding half of the society or mistreating the half of the society. So in fact, that's what today we see many of crimes that goes against women, and I'm not even going into the women in war and conflict, where of course women are used as a shield very often to bring shame to the different tribes or to the enemies in terms of wars. But I'm talking even on a regular basis, and I'm talking on a day-to-day life. Today, if you are a woman and a victim of a rape, depending on the legislation of your country in this part of the world, so the best case scenario is to marry your rapist, because if your rapist proposed to marry you, then of course he's not considered as a criminal anymore, because he will be able to sort out the shame, and you could not bring the shame into your family. So this idea of being the victim will transform, versus the criminal will transform to the person that brings the shame to the family versus the hero who will take off the shame to the family. So this is totally irrational and doesn't have any consistency. The other element is to see, and the worst case scenario is if you are raped, what's going to happen is you will have to bring your 4 witnesses, male witnesses, who will confirm indeed that you are a victim. Otherwise, this could be transformed, and you could be considered as going on adultery, and you will end up being the one penalized for something you didn't create it and you were a victim of. So it's all these issues that should be tackled, because the violence is at every single structure and every single institution, every level. Without mentioning the different violence, again, in economic violence, also this is another element that women suffer from. The access to opportunity is another violence. So it's all these violences that creates this very imbalanced societies, and that feed the irrationality, and where even the families within the same family, there is a total unstructured, and for which we have to try to find solutions, because it's those families and those people that are grown up in those families that's transformed by the time into radicalized. It's easier to radicalize, talking about the movement that's happened today with the radicalization of the youth. I mean, it's easier to brainwash a young man that grow up in a violent family than another one who grew up in a more peaceful environment. One of the elements. Same thing, it's easier to radicalize a young woman that grew up in an unbalanced family where she was rejected and threatened and treated from the very beginning as a half person than if you make sure that your girl grow up as a strong element within the family that has its own call. So that will be difficult basically to work and try to change her thoughts or her mind, to push her over the edge. So, and these issues has to be tackled from government, has to cooperate and work closely with civil societies, because civil societies are the integrated element that can help this government into going through and chase and eventually eradicate this phenomena. And one of the examples we keep mentioning in the region is basically the successful, maybe up to now, a successful story that Tunisia went through. I think if there was not a solid basis within the Tunisian mentalities, within the Tunisian culture of women and equality of women and women empowerment, definitely Tunisia would have never been able to overcome the change of this institution imposed by the Nahda then. because the Nahda came with a new element within the institution that would change the status of women from equalitarian to complementary. And because the culture of equality is so well implemented that the women could not accept that. It was even impossible to digest from the different elements of the society. So they have to fight hand in hand in order to impose what the society knew for over 50 years. So this is a brilliant example. And if Tunisia as a Muslim country, managed to impose this secular and equalitarian view within its constitution, and hopefully within the implementing law and the change in law that's coming in building this new state, I believe that every single country, Muslim country, would be able to do it and should do it. And the only way that any other Muslim country cannot do it, it's because of the willingness of this country and how they see this phenomena of women. And unless the Arab world, unless the country of the region, understand that every man and women are equal and have to take part, have an equal opportunity in taking part on enhancing and promoting the society, this part of the world will never grow up successfully, because we cannot ignore half of society or half of humanity and thinking that we can grow equal and be sustainable in growing. Thank you.